So, picture this. It's early 2025, and President Trump decides the world needs a bit more drama. He looks north at his friendly, maple syrup-loving neighbor Canada and thinks, you know what? Let's hit them with a tariff. And not just a small one. He unleashes a massive 25% tariff on almost everything Canada sells to the United States. He does the same to Mexico, blaming them for problems that, according to the data, were actually getting better. It was a move that left many people scratching their heads. It's like getting angry at your quiet flatmate for a mess you made yourself. The official reason was flimsy, but the message was clear. America was flexing its economic muscles, and it didn't seem to care who got squeezed in the process. Now, you might think Canada would just take it. Apologize for being too polite or for their money having too many colors. But that's not what happened, not this time. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in his final days in office, looked at these tariffs and essentially said, "Oh, no you didn't." He called the move very dumb and accused Trump of trying to weaken Canada for a potential takeover. He made it crystal clear, declaring, "We will never be the 51st state." It was a mic-drop moment for Canadian politics. The response wasn't just words, it was swift and powerful, a clear signal that the days of just smiling and nodding were well and truly over. Canada immediately fired back with its own 25% tariffs on a whopping $20.5 billion worth of American goods. And they warned there was more to come, with another $85 billion in the pipeline. It wasn't just the federal government either. The provinces got in on the action, showing a united front that was truly remarkable. Ontario, the country's most populous province, took a direct hit at American distilleries by pulling all U.S. liquor from its government-run store shelves. That's a massive market, worth about $700 million a year, suddenly gone. It's like telling your biggest customer you're not selling to them anymore. It was a bold, defiant gesture that got everyone's attention. Across the country, a wave of patriotism surged. It wasn't just about politics anymore, it became personal. People started boycotting American products, choosing Canadian-made goods with a newfound sense of pride. In Nova Scotia, officials even threatened to add surcharges to the electricity they sell to the northeastern United States, right as summer was approaching. Imagine your neighbor suddenly threatening to charge you extra for the air conditioning in July. This was Canada drawing a line in the snow. They were telling the world, and especially their powerful neighbor, that they were a sovereign nation, proud and strong, and they were not going to be pushed around. Just as Canada stood up to the economic pressure, it found it wasn't standing alone. Down south, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum wasn't buying Trump's justifications for the tariffs either. She saw them for what they were, a political power play. Rejecting the flimsy excuse linking trade to fentanyl trafficking, Mexico announced its own set of retaliatory tariffs. This was a significant moment. It showed that this wasn't just a squabble between the US and Canada, it was a coordinated response from North America's other major trading partner. The United Front sent a powerful message to Washington: if you target one of us, you target all of us. It was a trade-based version of the Three Musketeers. On the other side of the world, another economic giant was watching closely. China, which had already been hit with extra tariffs, decided to join the counter-offensive. They targeted key American industries, imposing their own tariffs of 10 to 15% on crucial U.S. exports like soybeans, corn, and pork. This was a strategic move aimed directly at the agricultural heartland of America, a sector that relies heavily on international markets. Furthermore, China halted sales to 15 U.S. companies, showing that it could play hardball too. This global pincer movement, with Canada, Mexico, and China all pushing back at the same time, created a formidable challenge to American economic dominance. This international alliance wasn't just a government-led affair. A groundswell of public sentiment began to build, with people calling for their own forms of economic protest. An influential opinion piece started circulating, proposing a global boycott of travel to the United States. Think about that for a second. In 2023 alone, Canadian tourists spent over 26 billion Canadian dollars in the US. Taking that money away would be a serious blow. The article also urged ordinary citizens around the world to protest by selling their US dollars. The idea was to put pressure on the American currency itself, questioning its long-held status as the world's go-to reserve. This growing global movement was about more than just tariffs. It was a reaction to a style of politics that many countries found aggressive and unpredictable. For years, the US dollar has been the king of currencies, but its dominance has been slowly slipping since the early 2000s. This coordinated action by Canada and its allies threatened to speed up that decline. It was a bold new chapter in international relations, where countries were using their collective economic power to challenge a superpower. Canada may have led the charge, but it quickly became clear that it was marching with a global army at its back. Back in the United States, the immediate reaction to this global trade war was not good. The stock market, which hates uncertainty more than a cat hates water, took a nosedive. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged over 600 points as investors panicked about the potential damage. It was a clear sign that Wall Street was worried. Economists started crunching the numbers, and the forecasts were grim. They warned that these tariffs, both the ones imposed by the US and the retaliatory ones from other countries, could seriously harm the American economy. Suddenly, the idea of an America First policy was looking like it might put the American economy last. Experts began warning that the cost of living for ordinary Americans was about to go up. One analysis predicted that the trade war could add about 0.5 percentage point to core inflation by the end of 2025. This meant that the price of everything, from groceries to electronics, would get more expensive. The average American household could end up paying about $1,000 more per year just to buy the same things they did before. Even the price of petrol was expected to rise, especially in the Northeast, which relies on energy imports from its northern neighbor. The tariffs were meant to protect American interests, but they were starting to look like a tax on the American people. The pain was not spread evenly. Some of America's most iconic industries were facing a potential catastrophe. The auto sector, for example, was in the direct line of fire. Car manufacturing relies on complex supply chains that cross the Canadian and Mexican borders multiple times. One report from Barclays estimated that the new tariffs could completely wipe out all the profits for General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. That's not a small dip, that's erasing their entire profit margin. It was a terrifying prospect for an industry that employs hundreds of thousands of Americans. The tariffs were like throwing a spanner into the finely tuned engine of the North American economy. The agricultural sector was also bracing for a massive hit. When China and Mexico targeted American farm products like soybeans and pork, they were aiming at a vulnerable spot. Farmers who had spent years building relationships with international buyers suddenly found their biggest markets closing. This economic fallout demonstrated a fundamental truth. In a globalized world, nobody wins a trade war. The attempt to punish other countries was boomeranging back, and the US economy was feeling the sting. The bold challenge led by Canada was proving to be far more costly to the United States than President Trump might have ever anticipated. Amidst all this economic drama, the talk of the US annexing Canada bubbled up, a recurring fantasy for some American politicians. But let's be real, this idea is a non-starter. It's not just difficult, it's practically impossible. And for very good reasons. First off, Canadian law is a fortress. For Canada to join the US, it would require the unanimous consent of all 10 provinces. Getting 10 Canadian provinces to agree on anything is a Herculean task. It's like trying to get a moose, a beaver, and a goose to form a barbershop quartet. It just isn't going to happen. This legal requirement alone is a massive roadblock that makes the whole idea a constitutional nightmare from the get-go. But wait, there's more. Even if, by some miracle, all the provinces agreed, the process isn't over. Any change to Canada's status as a sovereign nation would need the approval of the Governor-General, who represents the British monarch. That's right, King Charles III would technically have to sign off on it. Can you imagine that phone call? "Hello, Your Majesty. It's America. We'd like to absorb one of your realms, if you don't mind." It sounds like a plot from a comedy film, not a serious geopolitical strategy. This connection to the British Crown is a fundamental part of Canada's identity and another layer of protection against any foreign takeover. Then you have the incredibly important and legally protected rights of Canada's Indigenous peoples. The First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples have rights enshrined in the Canadian Constitution and recognized under international law. These rights are tied to the land and to their relationship with the Canadian Crown, not the US government. Any attempt at annexation would face monumental legal challenges from Indigenous groups who would rightly defend their sovereignty, treaties, and constitutionally protected status. This isn't just a hurdle, It's a mountain built on centuries of history, law, and culture that simply cannot be ignored or bypassed. Finally, there's the simple, beautiful fact that Canada is not the United States. It has its own unique culture, its own history, and 2 official languages. The province of Quebec, with its distinct French-speaking culture and its own civil law system, would never agree to be absorbed into the American melting pot. The idea of annexation completely ignores the deep-seated identity of 38 million people who are fiercely proud of their country. They are proud of their healthcare, their politeness, and yes, even their complicated relationship with winter. Canada is standing up for itself on the world stage, not because it wants to be like America, but precisely because it doesn't.